talk about it. Expounding thoughts on Viksit Bharat 2047 is Amitabh Kant in close conversation with Prem Shankar Jha.
If I could sit, let us come and sit here, and maybe I sit here. It's easier to look. Is this okay?
Yes, absolutely, sir. The camera angle is fine.
Can you hear me now? Hello? Hello? All well? Okay? So, let me just have a glass of a bit of water first. My throat is dry. Sure. Give me a moment. First, let me say that I feel honored that I have the opportunity to ask Amitabh Kant about his ideas on the economy, on where we have come from in this long period since independence, and where we are going, where we could go, and particularly in the context, coming to the end of that, in the context of a world which must not merely somehow or the other continue to achieve growth, but also do so while decarbonizing your energy. Now, this is, I think that these are the key elements in these two massive books, which I wish I have in fact been able to read quite a lot of one of them, but I wish I'd had more time. But I'll do my best, and I'm sure that Amitabh will more than satisfy, fill any gaps in my. If I make any mistakes, Amitabh, you'll know.
No, thanks, Prem, for doing it at short notice, but you're brilliant and you're prolific.
Thank you so much. I don't know whether I deserve that, but anyway, thank you. The two books are The Elephant Moves, India's New Place in the World. This is looking ahead at where we are trying to go and how we can get there. And Made in India, which I think is a more recent book, am I right? And this is good because it's very much worth having, because apart from looking at the direction ahead for us in industrialization, it points out where we were historically, at the time of independence. And the last chapters talk about the challenge that we face while trying to keep economic growth going in the face of the need to decarbonize our energy sources, which is going to be very expensive. So I'm going to, on these points, I'm going to start off, Amitabh. It's so recent, I can't even think of where to begin. But let me. I have made some notes. So where are they? If I can find them. Yeah, here they are. All right. You started by pointing out that industrial growth, India's been going through a period of not absolute, but relative deindustrialization, where the ratio of industry to the GDP has been going down, while that of the services sector has been going up very rapidly. So that what's happening is that while it is true that we are having a fairly high rate of, a steady high rate of growth if you take everything together, it is not a growth that is employment generating. And it is also a growth which is creating more and more income imbalances and urban-rural imbalances. And Amitabh has written extensively on both these subjects in these books. So I'm going to start off by saying, Amitabh, please tell us something about how you feel about our industrial performance and why the ratio of industry in the GDP has been declining instead of rising as it has done so spectacularly in China.
So Prem, the book looks at the history of India's growth, and if you look at around 1700, India's share in global GDP was around close to 25%. By the time we became independent in 1947, the British Raj period would come down to just 5% of the global GDP. And subsequently, the British Raj was replaced actually by License Raj. And what we saw throughout that period was a continuous process of deindustrialization in India's economy. Now, it's my basic philosophy in the book is that it's not possible for India to grow rapidly at 9 to 10% year after year for 3 decades or more, which is what Japan did between 50 and 70, which is what Korea and Taiwan did between 60 and 90, which is what China did between 90 and 210. They all grew at rates of 9.6 to 10.2%. If India has that ambition to grow at high rates of 9 to 10% per annum for 3 decades, you can't grow only on the back of services sector. You need to grow your manufacturing. You need to do sustainable urbanization, which is very critical for India. No country has been able to grow without sustainable urbanization. And you need to enhance agriculture productivity. And agriculture productivity will not increase with such a high dependence of population on agriculture. So today, you had 42% of your population dependency on agriculture prior to COVID. And post-COVID, latest PLFS data shows that it's 46.5% of your population dependency on agriculture. So you need to take population away from agriculture and put them into large-scale manufacturing for India to grow at high rates. Now, manufacturing is also critical, not merely for growth with good quality jobs, but you also need to grow because you want to become an integral part of global value chains. And that's why you need to be a very major manufacturer to be able to export. And without exports, India can't grow. Every single country which has grown in the post-World War II period has grown by being an exporting nation. And if you grow at 4% of exports in your GDP, it's not possible. You need your exports to grow at 20% per annum year after year. That's the basic philosophy.
How would you suggest that we raise our export growth rate? I mean, what would you do if you were, for example, the finance minister? What policies would you recommend?
So first is much like what we've done in Government of India, we tried to make India easy and simple by scrapping a lot of rules, regulation, procedures, paperwork, and acts, which have been built from the British period onwards and then were built during the socialistic era of India. That we built a lot of rules, regulation, procedures. All of them need to be scrapped, and you need to begin de novo. So Government of India did that. It scrapped about 1,600 laws. It's not happened anywhere else in the country. India jumped up 79 positions in the World Bank Ease of Doing Business. But a lot of action is in the states. So you need states to grow. I mean, you need not merely Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Tamil Nadu to grow. You need the eastern part of India to grow. You need UP, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan to grow at rates of 10% plus for the next 3 decades, because these are the most populous states of India. If UP was a country, it would be the 6th most populous country in the world. So you need these states to really grow, and you need massive reforms in terms of ease of doing business in these countries. Secondly, you need to improve the quality of infrastructure. Huge focus on infrastructure is critical. And then that alone can attract, you need to do a lot of skill development, because talent attracts investment, and investment leads to growth. So all this is interlinked to each other. These are all critical issues, to my mind. India can't grow on the back of the southern part of India and the western part of India. You need the eastern part of India to grow very rapidly.
Now, I think you put your finger exactly on the point that I worry about, and which I would like to ask you about. We have the least industrialized part of our country at this moment happens to be precisely this northern Indo-Gangetic belt. And one part of the reason seems to be just actually a more medieval mindset in the governments, which were the state governments, particularly, since he's talking about state governments. One example, for example, is that these are the four or five states here which paid no attention to the importance of English. And today, you cannot even make a small order for a dozen pair of shoes from Tamil Nadu if you don't do it in English. Which language will you do it in? Will you do it in Tamil? Will you do it in Hindi? You might just get away with Hindi with a very small businessman, but the fact is that we needed a link language. And we had one already, which in English, which had been almost the only good donation that was left behind by the British Empire. And we have not made full use of it, while the southern states have done that. And that's a very important thing. Would you agree with me that actually the solutions to this problem lie really not just in things that you can measure through an economist's measurement tools, but through also social tools?
So, Prema, that's a very important question to my mind, because I've been a long-term believer that it will not be possible for India to grow at high rates of 9 to 10% for a 3-decade period. Not merely because of English. You can do this in your local language. Japan has done this for decades. But you can't do this without improving learning outcomes, without improving health outcomes. And you can't do it without improving nutritional standards. You can't have weak mothers producing weak children who are then stunted and wasted. And, if you have a very high level of challenge on learning outcomes, and if 35% of your population in class 10 is not able to do class 2 physics, chemistry, or even social studies in its mother tongue, then your education system needs a huge push in terms of improving learning outcomes and health outcomes. I think, to my mind, social indicators are most important. And I've seen this in, I've worked for about half my career in Kerala. One of the main reasons why people from Kerala go and work all over the world is simply because there's been such a huge emphasis on improving education, health, and nutrition. So the country needs to make a radical jump, not merely on industrialization, but on social indicators. And social indicators are really the key to long-term sustained growth. Japan could grow, Korea could grow, China could grow, and they lifted also very vast segments of our population by focusing on education, health. They could sustain it for a 3-decade period by laying emphasis on education, health, and nutrition. That really is a long-term play. These are slow-moving indicators, but they are critical to India's growth story.
I couldn't agree more with you on that, Amitabh. I'm very glad you said that. And now, one of the, again, there's a thought that I had, I wanted to ask him, and it just slipped my mind, so give me just a second. Amitabh, we did have a period of pretty rapid growth after liberalization, from about 1995 onwards, if you remember. Yeah, but we took 2 years for adjustment because we had a huge foreign exchange crisis at that time. And the reforms were really put in place by 1993. It took 2 years to put the reforms in, and then the effect and mind you, it required a great deal of what you might call fine-tuning of all kinds of taxes, particularly import duties. I'll give you one example. We brought down the import duties dramatically on finished products in 1991 or 92, but we did not remember that much of our manufacture is based upon, the domestic manufacture is based upon imported components. We didn't bring down the duty on components until 1 year later, when the industry was absolutely thrashing around and saying, for God's sake, help us, you're killing us. So it took about, that's why I'm saying, I say at least we have to say that the growth rate accelerated after 1993. So, okay, maybe not 1995, but broadly speaking, we've had a growth rate of about 8% in industry from 1994, 93, 94, 95 till 2010, 2011. And then, while the GDP growth rate has continued to rise, although slightly more slowly, the industrial growth rate has dropped to 4% average, and it's just stuck there. A little more 1 year, a little less the other year. How do we get out of this problem?
Prem, the important thing is that when Korea, China grew, when Japan grew, the world was growing and expanding. There was liberalization all over the world. That was a period when the American economy was booming, so they penetrated the American economy. The Japanese economy grew on the back of America. The Chinese grew on the back of America. Actually, America lost its art of manufacturing and outsourced it to China. So if you look at the top 40 American companies, they source more than 95% of their manufacturing to China. Yeah. But they do this because China became a very efficient economy. I mean, logistically, it's the most outstanding success in terms of, top-class competitive production. But when India opens, now when India gets into this long strategy of growth of, becoming a Viksit Bharat by 2047, there are three major challenges which India is confronted with. One is, firstly, that the relative period of stability across the world has come to an end. I mean, you have a big power conflict in the heart of Europe. You have the Russia-Ukraine war going on for about 3 years. You have Middle East up in flames. 400,000 people have actually died in Middle East, in a much shorter period, and just about 40,000 people have died in the Russia-Ukraine war. So look at 10 times in a much shorter period. Secondly, so you have the period of stability is over. Secondly, global supply chains are disrupted totally. You have a scenario where Biden has put in 100% duty levels on import from China. So the electric vehicles are seeing 100% duty, batteries are seeing a 50% duty, and China is retaliating. But the important thing to understand is that China has already captured about 70% of the electric vehicle market. The BYD today controls 22% of the electric vehicle market. Tesla is just 12%. BYD is 22%. Battery, they control about 78% of the market. They've controlled all the lithium, nickel, cobalt manufacturing all over the world. So what America is saying is that you're putting state money, it's not the market forces, you are controlling through state power, and therefore we are going to retaliate with putting duties. So that's the global supply chains are disrupted. And the third thing is that you're seeing the rise of new forces, completely new forces, artificial intelligence, quantum computing. All this is going to give a huge rise to productivity. I mean, they're going to make a huge difference to the world because they will cut across every single sector. But the basic ethics and the basic assumptions on which they are on which they will be based requires international cooperation and international regulation, because without that, you'll have human conflict on a very large scale. I mean, if AI starts driving drones and war machines, you'll have human conflict on a very large scale. So these are three very unpredictable scenarios which China, Korea were not confronted with, which India is confronted with when it starts a long growth strategy.
I wanted to, I couldn't agree more with you on this. I really couldn't. And in fact, all I could do is elaborate, and we don't have the time for that. What I'm going to do is ask you one specific thing. You see, I have a theory about what happened with industrial growth, and I want you to comment on it. We were growing very well when the world was economic growth was also very high until the crash of 2009. The world economic crash took place, and then the Chinese went in for a major pump priming exercise, initially 4.3 trillion yuan, but that went out of control, and they ended up by spending 24.5 trillion yuan over 5 years, and then drove themselves into a huge recession from which they're trying to pull themselves out through the BRI. That was one side of it. In our case, something opposite happened. We had actually, much of our growth had been based upon in capital that was, obtained from foreign exchange. We had opened up private borrowing, external borrowing in 2008, 2007-8, and by the time that 2010-11 came, we had $300-400 billion worth of private capital, not just debt, but also we had to pay high interest rates on those. Now, if we were able to meet this because there was, with good interest rates and good growth in India, we were getting a fair amount of foreign short-term capital coming into our economy, into our financial system, and we were using that to pay the interest on the private loans that were being taken. Now, what happened was, with this the crash in the world economy, for industry to continue growing, we had to bring down our exchange rate, our interest rates. If we did that, the short-term capital would immediately fly out, and if that happened, we'd be in another foreign exchange crisis of the kind that we had at the beginning of the Kuwait-Iraq war, which in fact triggered all our economic liberalization. So since then, Amitabh, this is a problem. How do we get around this problem? Because we have, could we, for example, devalue the rupee? I think it's been stable at 82, 83 for quite a long time, but our inflation rate and what's happening in the rest of the world, our weakening industrial position, is one that does not actually justify the stability. Wouldn't it be a good idea to bring down the exchange rate?
Prem, you're talking about macroeconomic stability in the economy, and macroeconomic stability is a function of, to my mind, the extent of state borrowing. So the state borrowing, if you look at both center and state today, is still quite high. And secondly, it's about 9% of your GDP, which needs to be brought down. Though that's critical, that the state borrowings must come down. The center has brought down its state borrowing, but the state borrowing is still high. So that needs to be brought down. And secondly, the fiscal deficit. The fiscal deficit roadmap, which got upset due to COVID, has to be brought in check. And that means the government expenditure needs to come down and the private expenditure must move up. And that would mean it's not about devaluation at all at this stage. It's about ensuring that the government brings down its expenditure and the private expenditure goes up, and that means greater level of savings in the economy, greater levels of investment. The private investment must rise. Why the government investment went into post-COVID era, why the government has spent more, is because it built 40 million houses for its people. 40 million houses means that India actually built an entire Australia within India. That's more than the population of Australia. We built about 130 million toilets, which is more than the population of Germany. We've built 253 million piped water connections to the people of India. And we built about 88,000 kilometers of roads. So that's the kind of infrastructure the government has built to drive India's economy when the private sector investment was not coming in post-COVID era. But now we've reached a stage, India government took its capex spend from 1% to 4.5%. But now is the time for the private sector investment to rise, because the twin balance sheet problem of India, both the balance sheets of the corporates are in excellent health, and the balance sheet of the banks are in brilliant condition. We've never had such good balance sheets in India, and I don't think anywhere else in the world there has been such good balance sheet as in India. And this is the time for the private capex to rise very significantly.
Well, you've strengthened for me one argument that I've been wanting to make, which is that you really must bring down interest rates. You know, they are too high, and I think we can afford it. And we can ride the little turbulence in foreign exchange balances. Because the economy is doing well, people will not lose the confidence that would have happened had we devalued at the beginning of the recession. And I think that this would be a good way to go, and I agree with you on that. So one, let me just, I want to now look ahead. See, we have a dual problem today. One is we must industrialize, and we must industrialize in a way that we create jobs. Our unemployment situation is really terrible. The second is that we must industrialize in a way that is also becomes less and less carbon intensive as we go along. We have to combine 2 or 3 very difficult goals, which are difficult in themselves, and yet, is it possible, Amitabh, and what would you suggest for doing this?
Of course it's possible, very much possible. Why is it not possible? I mean, if India can do this infrastructure creation in the last 7 years, if India can digitize at such a rapid pace, we do 50% of the digital real-time fast payments in the world. Last year, we did 130 billion real-time digital payments. We do 50%, China is next with just 22%. I mean, look at the digital infrastructure India has built up, Prem. I mean, everybody has a digital identity. Everybody's bank account is linked to Aadhaar and to the mobile. We do digital transaction. Your young startups are able to do credit in 30 seconds. They have taken the stock market. Zerodha, Grow, and Upstock have taken stock market into tier 2, tier 3 cities where you do stock market transaction in 30 seconds. Go Digit and Acco do insurance in 1 minute. This was unheard of when I was a young officer, and this is unheard of in Europe or in America, what India has done. And why is it not possible? For India to grow big, you need 10,000 large companies, because large companies create their own ecosystem of small and medium enterprises who then supply to them. It can't be done in isolation. When Maruti came in, it created its own ecosystem of MSMEs. When Tata Motors grew and expanded, it created its own ecosystem of small, and then large companies penetrate global markets. So India needs 10,000 large companies to penetrate. MSMEs never grow in isolation. To say that we'll make MSMEs grow without making companies large, that's not possible. And that's why we conceptualize the production-linked incentives, so that you could make companies bigger, 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 and bigger within 5 years. And second thing is, you need 10 Indian states, 10 to 12 Indian states to grow at 10% plus for the next 3 decades. These two are critical for India to grow at 10% for the next 3 decades.
I'm completely in agreement with you. I once again still ask, is there room for making investment more attractive by bringing down interest rates?
So interest rates is a tricky issue
really
because, no, you're right. Interest rates are high because that's a function of macroeconomic stability. Interest rates will come down when the fiscal deficits of states will come down, states' borrowing will come down. That's a function of private sector stepping in for greater investments in this country. And that's what I feel. You can't look at, because if you were to bring down interest rates, and inflation are also correlated. This is regularly monitored by the MPC on RBI, and I would leave it to the greater wisdom of the Monetary Policy Committee to take a call on this. But the important thing is to raise productivity. For interest rates to come down on a long-term basis, you need to really ensure that your ability to raise productivity, production, private sector investment, all that is very critical. You can't just take one line and say that make interest rates come down. it's a larger macroeconomic problem. There are many complex issues correlated with each other.
Well, I agree. Once again, I agree with you that it is there. You can't rely upon one single policy change to create an economic miracle, and therefore you need several to come together. And so earlier, what I was saying was that it's really a combination of allowing devaluation to make India's exports cheaper, and also, and that would happen automatically if you brought down interest rates by a couple of percent. It wouldn't be very much, I mean, maybe 10% or 12% of devaluation, but it would increase in India's competitive powers greatly, both abroad and also within your own country. As Amitabh has written in his book today, we are in industrial products terms, we are net importers. We buy more imported manufactured goods than we buy Indian manufactured goods now, and this is a very very serious imbalance. It's an overturning of the very concept of economic growth, and so I really am looking for solutions now, and I admit that we cannot just discuss them in 5 minutes and 10 minutes here, But now, how much time have you got left?
Last 10 minutes.
Good. So now we've got 10 minutes more. Can we have questions? Anybody? And observations? I have one or two things to talk about climate change at the end, but we'll come to that afterwards if we have the time. I'll let them decide this little conflict.
Thank you. So,
This little conflict.
Mr. Amitabh Kant is our rock star civil servant, and he's Amitabh Can. So wherever he's posted, whatever he does, things change for better. But the point is, sir, that the civil services needs reform right in the womb to the tomb. So one Amitabh Kant and few of them cannot change. So we need reforms, certainly, mostly in terms of recruitment, the manner, the qualities which are needed, and the qualities which are tested, they have to be aligned. There has to be fire in the belly that for public spirit, for doing something. That's very, very important, sir. Another point is that, sir, you rightly said that, look, India's economic growth story is that of Western states and
Mahesh,
southern
why
states.
don't you come to the question so that I can respond to many others?
Right,
Because-
right. So, sir, I just want to know that in the context of cooperative federalism, where it is certainly in a very bad shape, can we expect these states, the eastern states, the other northern states, to have higher economic growth? Because the cooperative federalism, without cooperative federalism, we cannot be a successful. We cannot have a successful economic growth.
Okay,
In
so-
China and Korea had a dictatorship.
Okay.
30 years of dictatorship South Korea had. Then they added growth. So it was an efficient dictatorship, unlike inefficient democracy.
Mahesh,
Thank you.
first of all, I don't agree with the philosophy that countries grow only under dictatorship.
I agree, sir. Both.
Japan has grew under a democracy. And I think a great example of a democracy growing and being the most innovative country in the world is the United States, which let me tell you, has for the last 55 years kept its global share of GDP at 26%. And 26% of GDP, its market cap is close to about 45% with just 4% of the population. Now that's a lively, vibrant democracy. So don't be under this illusion that dictatorship delivers growth, first of all. Second thing is that, to my mind, it's definitely possible. Cooperative federalism is critical. We should make all our states compete with each other, put that data out in public domain. We need to name and shame them. We've done this with ease of doing business. First year we did this, Gujarat came number 1. Next year, Andhra beat Gujarat. Third year, Telangana beat both Andhra and Gujarat. But the good thing was that Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, which are mineral rich, they were 24th and 25th. They jumped up to 4th and 5th. sheer reforms by competition. You put pressure, put that data out in public domain. Make people know whether politicians and civil servants are delivering or not by putting data. Data for governance is key. It was not possible during your time and my time. Today, it's possible to get data on a real-time basis. That's what we did in an aspirational district program. You know, we put the data out and everybody knew who's performing, who's not performing. Put it out in public domain, across education, across health, across nutrition. That is the key to cooperative federalism. It can't be just cooperative, it has to be competitive federalism. Yeah.
So I have a very simple question. I'm not able to make out what does Viksit Bharat means. I being a middle class man, is it we are talking economy
Yeah,
that
lift up
India
your
would
mic,
be the
please.
third largest
Lift up your
economy?
mic.
Yeah,
Will, no, the question is very important, sir. If we talk about PPP basis per capita income,
Yeah, you
even
want to take it.
Thailand is same as China. It's 3 times of India.
yeah.
So is it only this that we are talking?
No.
Whereas if you compare Thailand to India today, sir, a Swachh Bharat mission, I as a middle class, I'm talking about,
No,
sir.
I'll explain it. You have
Sir,
got your question.
Sir, cities are as dirty as they were before. Sir,
got your
today
question.
a law and order is same what it was before. What is Viksit Bharat means to a middle class is my question.
So two things on that. One is Viksit Bharat is not merely in terms of taking your GDP from about 3.7 or 4 trillion to 30 trillion. It also means that your per capita income must move from US dollar 2,700 to 18,000. And that really means that your total GDP has to grow. That means between now and 2047, your GDP has to grow by 9 times. Your per capita income is to grow by 8 times. And for that to happen, your manufacturing must grow 16 times. But Viksit Bharat is not about GDP, it's not about per capita income, it's also the quality of life, it's about human happiness, and that's why I stressed on some of these issues of improving learning outcomes, health outcomes, and nutritional standards, which are very critical. You can't become a Viksit Bharat without enhancing your social indicators. That's important.
Hello.
We
May I?
have time for one, possibly two questions.
Yeah,
Yes,
I've got the mic.
Yeah, please,
What I want to ask you,
please.
do you want India to be the most powerful country in the world? Do you want India to be the richest country in the world? Or do you want India to be the happiest country in the world?
Well, obviously, I'd like India to be both.
No,
I'd
to
like
be the happiest country in the world.
No,
you've
I've
got to
got-
have balance. If we go the way you are suggesting, India is going to be destroyed. You need to have balance.
I never said.
I'm not.
I never said. That's why I said, happiness is important. Improving education, health, nutrition is important. All that can come. You will be able to raise the resources to put into education and health and nutrition.
But if we go the
If
way
you can't grow, if you don't grow,
if we go the way you're suggesting,
what is the way I've suggested? I've suggested what I've said. You can't put words in my mouth and say that I've suggested.
I'm not saying you said that. I'm asking you a question. I'm not saying what you said.
So I'm very clear that Indians at the end of 2047 must be happy citizens. But for happiness to happen to a vast segment of our population, you need huge improvement in social indicators. So my emphasis has always been that it is not possible for India to grow at 9 to 10%. Viksit Bharat can't happen if you don't grow at 9 to 10% for 3 decades. That cannot happen without improving education, health, nutrition. And without improving education, health, nutrition, you can't get human happiness.
Does that answer your question? Is that okay?
No, it doesn't answer my question completely.
sorry, would
because
you-
development is also a dirty word. You got to think about not vertical development, but horizontal. I agree with what you're saying.
I think that you're right, but we have to have a whole session on that. We cannot do that now. I agree with you, and we will talk later on over a drink if you like, because I also have my views. But this is Amitabh Kant's thing.
Let
There was
me-
one gentleman back there who wanted to.
The ex-mayor of Barcelona, then I'll come to Mira. Yeah, I'll respond to that.
Oh gosh, give
I'll
us 5
respond to
minutes
Mira.
more.
He's the ex-mayor of Barcelona. No, I'll respond to her because
It's a very short, Amitabh. Yeah, it's a very short question. How can you achieve these impressive goals that you talk about, so credible, with the levels of inequality that you still see in this country?
no, I said I must respond to his question because he's been the ex-mayor of Barcelona and he's done a phenomenal job of transforming Barcelona by making, he took vehicles away, made cities for cycling, walking, for public transportation. And so one of the key points which is very important is that India needs to do good urbanization in a very sustainable manner and not repeat the mistakes which the western part of the world has made when they were urbanizing. America, when it urbanized, actually its car companies, Ford and General Motors bought over the railway companies and destroyed them so that cars could sell. We can't afford that mistake. We need to make cities for cycling, walking, for people to walk, improve the quality of life of citizens, as the gentleman here was saying, make cities which are far more livable and far more sustainable, particularly in the context of climate action, which is critical. But that's good urbanization is very, very important because India is going to see 500 million people getting into the process of urbanization in the next 5 decades. That means the challenge for India is to create 2 Americas. We'll be creating 2 Americas in the next 5 decades. Now, how we urbanize and how we design our cities, how we plan them, will be very critical to India's growth story. And that's very, very important. I'll turn to Mira, Mira was the police commissioner of Pune, so I'll leave the last word to her.
Thank you, sir. Sir, you have not talked about the need to invest in criminal justice system. World Bank says if 50% of women join the workforce, GDP will go up by 9%. So the 9% you ask for can be given if you have a better criminal justice system and if girls are not afraid of coming out in the evening and working. So why not invest in criminal justice system? Enforcement also, sir.
Yeah. No, so that's a very important point. It will not be possible for India, in addition to education, health, and nutrition, it will not be possible for India to achieve that level of growth without enhancing and increasing very rapidly the participation of women in India's economy. It's not just the criminal justice system. The PLFS data shows that the level of participation of women in Indian economy was very low. It was 28%, which has now grown, in the latest data, is grown to 37.5%. But you need 50% of your economy to be driven by women. And that's very critical. And that would mean that you need to educate, you need to skill women, and you need to put them in leadership position. It's not just criminal justice system. That's important. But women have to be skilled, educated, and put into massive position of leadership. And that's why in G20, women-led development became a very important philosophy for India to drive in its G20. Despite opposition from several countries, we drove it and said women-led development will be very critical. And to India's growth story of 9 to 10% per annum, and to become a Viksit Bharat, 50% of the economy must be driven by women. Now, the World Economic Survey latest study says that actually for the world to do this will take 132 years. Now, none of us have 132 years. You, I, none of us. None of us will be alive in 132 years. So you need radical changes for that to happen. And that, to my mind, is very, very critical.
Well, thank you very much, Amitabh. And thank you for your questions and for the way you listened. I hope there are many more issues that come up and you will think about them. And please catch hold of him if you can. Don't let him run away. But in any case, I'm around. If you want to talk to me, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Prem. And thank you for joining in at the last minute. You're just simply awesome. Thanks.
Thank you for such an informative